with Tao, understanding surrender and its need. By surrender is meant the surrender of ego, egocentric identities. As a child is born, the conditioning begins by the family, friends, society, and the priest. We do not give a child an opportunity to decide for himself the way he wants to live his inner life. There is a prescribed age for voting, for driver's permit, for many things. But for religious conditioning, there is no age. Nobody asks the child whether the child is ready or not. We start imposing our own ideas. We do not give many options, make all the options open to the child and let him decide on his own. When you are going for voting, there are options available for you. Based on your own understanding, you choose the candidate for voting. So, surrender means surrender of ego. So, there are certain egocentric, the conditionings that are given by the society, by the family and friends. So these becomes the background. And based on this background, you develop your own identities, your own egocentric identities. So you are given that you are born in a Hindu family, so you are Hindu. You are born in a Christian family, Muslim family, so on and so forth. Now, as you grow, you develop many layers upon layers on it. That you are intelligent, you are doctor, you are engineer, you are this, you are rich, you are poor. So this creates a wall, a separating wall, and separates you from the whole. You become divided within yourself, divided from the society. You like to interact in your own company. The people who are religious, they form the group. They belong to this particular religious organization or that. These create inseparable divisions, invisible. They are not seen, yet they are. Imaginary walls. This is what you have to surrender. As long as you are divided, you look at this simple thing. Everything has a separate identity. You look at the food items, you are going to make something. For instance, you are going to make a pasta. Pasta has its separate identity. Salt, which is needed, has a separate identity. The pasta sauce of different types, each ingredient that has a separate identity, but this pasta is made beneficial, a tasty item for you by combining different separate identities. When they merge their egocentric identities, something is created that is known as a particular pasta. This pasta sauce. There are different types, varieties are available in the market. And when you are making the pasta, you need the pasta, you need the pasta sauce and other ingredients that are needed. If each one of these decide not to cooperate with the other or create obstruction, then the pasta that you want for your meals will not be available. So all those egocentric identities that separates you from the other has to dissolve, and so that the pasta, the sauce, the seasoning, the pasta, all these have to dissolve their separate identities to become one. That is a reality. So whatsoever you are surrendering, you are surrendering just a dream, a concept, a false notion and identities. And then what comes out is totally different. The pasta, the finished pasta is a reality that you wanted to attain to. You wanted to become harmonious, blissful within. For that, everything that is there in you has to cooperate. You want to record a video, so you have the systems, the microphone, the sound system, and where are you going to record, streaming or whatsoever. All of them has to work in harmony with one another. Only then it will be possible the final product, that live streaming, can be broadcasted and heard by those who are participating in it. There is a misconception created by the society and so-called ignorant ones that surrender means this, surrender means that. And if you are a woman and you are asked to surrender, it is a different meaning is given. That the person will take advantage of you, take advantage of your physical presence, the body. Surrender is of ego. Surrender is of that which separates you from the whole. Surrender is that of false notion that I am this, I am that. When it comes in reality, what is Hindu in you is your eyes, is your hands, is your feet, or anything. What is there? That is a doctor in you, an engineer in you, or a singer in you. That is a profession. You are making your life, living your life, and for that, the singing is your profession, medical field is your profession, and in medical field too there are different disciplines. Or you are a mechanical engineer or an auto electrical engineer or whatsoever. These are the ways of life, of making your living. You go to church, that is your way of religious aspect. But when you go, you are sick, you go to the hospital, or your vehicle is sick, you go to the auto engineer or mechanic. Do you ask his religious identity? Do you ask the doctor what is his religious identity, that you will not want to get treated by a person who does not belong to the religious identity that you have? That time it is a question of life and death. When inner transformation becomes the question of life and death, only then surrender will be possible. Then, when you are struggling for life and death, it is a question. You do not ask the identity of that doctor. You do not ask. You totally surrender to the doctor with total trust in him that he will be able to cure you. And you listen to whatever is told to you to do, whether it is a test or whatsoever it is. Only then there is a possibility of treatment to begin. So in the same way, when you are surrendering your egocentric identities, you are not separate, then surrender, because that is what surrender means. Then the process of trust begins. And trust is the essential prerequisite. Surrender of ego and egocentric identities and all that separates you from the whole is the beginning. This brings trust in you. And with trust, the new process begins. You come to this understanding. With trust, there comes an understanding that this is the way. The process of healing, the process of transformation can begin. The moment you surrender this false attitude, false identities, you are one with existence. Surrender brings trust. Trust not in that person alone, the doctor. Through the doctor, you are surrendering, you are developing trust in the whole existence. You become one with the existence. There is no conflict between you and the instrument through which the trust has come into you. No conflict whatsoever. And if there is no conflict, you have no limitations then. First, surrender of egocentric identities, all that separates you from the whole. So I give you the example of a doctor that you have to get a test, a treatment done for this ailment that you are suffering from. So first of all, the egocentric identities that I am separate has to dissolve. And when that comes in, the trust is developed. With the trust, the process begins. The understanding comes in. And there is no conflict in you. There is no bondage, no boundary. You are not separate. And when it is not there, so in the same way, you want to experience blissful existence, transform. The first egocentric identities are surrendered. So you develop trust in the person and through him in the entire existence and the process. Then slowly and slowly you find all boundaries, all bondages are dissolving. You are not separate. You cannot be defeated because there is no one to be defeated. You cannot die because there is no one to die. You cannot be in misery because there is no one to be in misery. The moment you surrender the ego, the egocentric identities, the whole nonsense that comes with this is surrendered. The misery, the bondage, the pain, the suffering, the hellish understanding, everything is surrendered. You become one with existence, and this oneness is freedom. So, to say that freedom, in order to have the freedom from bondage and everything, surrender is the prerequisite. And the moment everything is surrendered, the misery, the bondage, the pain, the suffering, you become one with existence, and becoming one with existence, your innerness is freedom. Separation from the whole creates a bondage. Oneness is freedom. Not that you become free, not that you become free. Remember this. You are no more. When you dissolve, the drop merges into the ocean. The drop is no more. So it is not that you become free. It is the way of language, because there is no way else, saying that drop merges into the ocean. This is one reality. Drop is ready, dissolve everything, and is ready to merge into the ocean. The moment drop merges into the ocean, it does not remain anymore identified as drop. So it does not mean that drop has become free. It has dissolved, and that dissolution is the freedom. Really, when you are not, means you are what. When I say you are not, when I say drop has dissolved, means drop is not identified as a drop. Even if you take a drop from the water, from the ocean, it is not the same as it was before it merged into the ocean. It has something different quality to it, because before merging into the ocean, it has a separate identity. You had a separate identity before. You had a separate identity before you dissolved into the oceanic presence. You were identified with your identities, egocentric identities that separated you from the whole. You dissolved that. So with that dissolution, something new has happened to you. Now the moment you merge, the freedom has come into you. You are free now. But you do not, freedom does not mean you can exist separately. When all the ingredients that are necessary to make the pasta, they dissolve into one another, then they are free. That's why they have dissolved. But they do not exist separate. Their existence is as total existence. The existential, all those things that are merged, mixed to make the pasta or mixed to make the tea, has become existential, and it is identified, known by a different name. So freedom is not the freedom of ego that you can still exist as. You have dissolved. Everything that is required to make the pasta or make the tea has dissolved. lost their separate identities, all the walls have been dropped, and so it will not remain identified, it has attained freedom. Everything has attained the freedom, but that freedom does not remain individual. The freedom is the totality. Freedom, how to express you are no more, really when you are not, freedom is. How to express it is a problem. When you are not, freedom is. Buddha is reported to have said, you are not going to be in bliss. When you are not, bliss is. You cannot say that I am still. So when the drop merge into the ocean, then what remains? The oceanic presence remains. When your all egocentric identities are dissolved, you have become one, then oneness is there. This oneness, so Buddha rightly said, you are not going to be in bliss. That you will not be there. Bliss will be there. The oceanic presence will be there. You are not going to be liberated. You are not going to be liberated. Instead, you are going to be liberated from yourself. And what is yourself? Your egocentric identities. The identities, the things with which you have identified yourself up to now. You have identified yourself with this. That liberation means it is freedom from that. You are not identified as a man or a woman, identified as a nationality, identified or separate because of the language, because of your social status, or anything. Instead, all these things that I am man, I am a woman, I am white, I am black, I am Indian, I am American. This is what you have known yourself. Now all these things have merged into something, and you are liberated from that identification. For certain purpose, you will still maintain your nationality, your everything, but it is freedom is not freedom of the ego. Freedom is freedom from ego. Freedom from egocentric identities. Earlier on, egocentric identities were your identities. Now freedom means you are free from that identity. And if you can understand this, that freedom is freedom from ego. Not ego is freedom again. Not the freedom of ego, but from ego. Then surrender and freedom becomes one only then. Both are necessary. If you consider that the ego is to attain to freedom, it will not happen. It is a particular kind of identity. You are being freed from that identity. You are freed from the identities which has been causing pain and suffering to you. You have lived life in a particular way, with a particular identity, with a particular understanding, And all these have been condensed as ego and has been the cause of your pain and suffering. So, do your identity as this and that has to be free? No, you have to attain freedom from all these identities. So, it is not of ego, freedom of ego, but freedom from ego. And what is ego is you, freedom from yourself. So first step is freedom from yourself, and then comes just freedom. This I will take another time. So it is freedom from ego, and if you can understand this, that freedom is freedom from ego, then you will realize that surrender and freedom are not separate, they are one. Then they mean one. And if you take the ego as the standpoint from which you think, then ego will say, why surrender? If you take ego as the standpoint of your thinking, as normally we do, ego as the standpoint from which you think, then ego will say why surrender is necessary. And this is one of the greatest misconceptions created. Because if you surrender, then you cannot be free. Then you become a slave. So surrender is considered to be slavery. When you surrender, you have become slave to him. And you will have to realize yourself. When you surrender, has you become a slave, or you become free from those false identities that has been causing you pain and suffering? This you have to decide. When you surrender, it is said that you become slave. But really, you are not surrendering to anyone. What is surrender? You are not surrendering to anyone. This is the second point to be understood. You are not surrendering to someone. You are simply surrendering. What are you surrendering? Your false identities. There is no one who will take your surrender. A master is simply a catalyst in whose presence this process of surrendering completes. If there is someone and you surrender to him, then it is a sort of slavery. Really, there is not even a God to whom you are surrendering. And when we talk about a God, that is just to find you something to help you to surrender. So what the master does, he becomes simply an instrument for your process of surrender to complete. But you are not surrendering to him, you are surrendering your egocentric identities and all that has been. So he makes you aware what has been the cause of your pain and suffering and all that. In Patanjali Yoga Sutra, God is talked about is just to help you to surrender. There is no God. Patanjali says there is no God, but it will be difficult for you to surrender to one. It will be difficult for you to simply surrender. to help you surrender, God is talked about or someone is talked about. If now you will realize that all that you had been able to do in front of the catalyst, the catalytic presence around you, that has simply helped you to surrender. But whatever you did it on your own. You realize that this identity was false. This was the cause of, it made you aware that this was the cause of this was the cause. So you did it all yourself. So we will continue this. Until then, take care and do have a pleasant day.